What's happening, everybody? On today's show, the godfather of college football, Phil Steele himself, going to join us right here on the show. We'll preview the SEC heading into 2023. Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. All right, without further ado, let's jump right into it. Welcome in our special guest. He is the great Phil Steele. Phil, welcome in, man. Another football season upon us. How are you?
I am doing great, Chris. How about yourself today?
Phil, it's always good to talk with you because every time I talk to you, I know the college football season is right upon us. Let's start here, Phil. We focus here on the SEC, and look, it's amazing what Kirby Smart and Georgia have built. We keep hearing that word three-peat thrown around this whole year, and it's tough. It's always tough to run the table, and it's tough to win back-to-back, let alone 3 championships in a row. But give me an idea where you are on Georgia right now. How tough is this road going to be to three-peat?
You know, I think they have an excellent shot at three-peating this year, and it's due to 2 parts, Chris. The first part would be the overall talent, and when you look at them defensively this year, I think they're better defensively. Last year they lost 9 draft picks. This year they only lost 5. They're a deeper, more experienced unit there. Offensively, they have a number 1 rated offensive line, number 4 set of receivers, number 6 set of running backs. The big question is quarterback, but I think Carson Beck at the end of the year is a Heisman contender. Because you look at Georgia's schedule, they'll be a double-digit favorite in their first 10 games. By the time he gets to his first real tough road test at Tennessee, he'll be a veteran QB at that time. Now, Georgia did almost lose to Missouri last year. And remember, if Ohio State kicks a field goal, we're not talking about a three-peat. We're talking about Ohio State as the defending national champ. So there are opportunities for teams to beat Georgia this year, but they'll be favored in every game, and I did pick them to go all the way.
Yeah, I love the Carson Beck Heisman pick. I got some good odds on him because when you think about it, Georgia goes running back by committee. They spread the ball around. There's no one wide receiver. It's going to be the quarterback, and Carson Beck's going to be the beneficiary of that if they do indeed run the table like I think they will. Sticking with the SEC East, a lot of people very high on Tennessee. I know they lose a bit, but obviously we got to see Joe Milton the third a little bit on the back end of last season. Where are you on Tennessee heading into 2023?
Yeah, I think Tennessee, if there's anybody that can knock off Georgia in the East, Tennessee would be the team to do it. And, of course, they get Georgia at home on November the 18th. The big question mark is going to be at the quarterback position. Now, Joe Milton's in his 3rd year of the system. I like that. He's got everything you want out of a quarterback, size-wise, arm strength, mobility. He's got it all. The big question mark I have is, can he be like Hendon Hooker was last year? 27 touchdown passes and just 2 interceptions. Can he be that careful with the football? That'll be the big-time question. Other than that, I think Tennessee's defense is better than last year. The offensive line has improved, and they've got plenty of weapons at the skill positions. They do have to play Bama on the road, but even if they lose that game, all they have to do is beat Georgia at home on November the 18th, and they could very well win the East. So I think if anybody in the East is going to contend with Georgia, it's Tennessee this year.
Yeah, we heard this from Texas a few years ago. We're back. Hearing that from the Tennessee fans, they're saying we're back, but we have to see it. You got to prove it, and certainly Tennessee in a great spot to do so. It's kind of consensus, Phil. Most people think Georgia number 1 in the East, Tennessee probably number 2 in the East. After that, it's a little bit of a toss-up. Talk to me a little bit about this jumbled mess of Kentucky and South Carolina, and who of those teams is going to prove through and maybe finish 3rd in the East.
Yeah, and I think you got 4 candidates there: South Carolina, Kentucky, Florida, and Missouri. And when you look at the 4, Missouri's the most experienced. They had a real good defense last year. The bulk of the defense is back. They've got 6 positions that rank in my top units, but I'm still waiting for Eli Drinkwitz to have himself a winning season. So I did not pick them 3rd in the East. Florida, I think, will be an improved team this year, even though they're only number 109 on my experience chart. Coach Napier, though, I mentioned him, the over-under for Florida was 5.5 this year, the lowest total of those 4 teams, and that actually made him happy. He's like, go ahead, put us under the radar. I like that. He expects Graham Mertz to be better than most of us expected coming in. So I think Florida could be dangerous. Kentucky, the big difference between them and last year is the Big Blue O-line. Last year it wasn't the Big Blue line. They only averaged 3.3 yards per carry, gave up 47 sacks. I think Devin Leary might be an upgrade at the quarterback position. They had in Ray Davis from Vanderbilt. They've got the defense and improved offensive line. I think they opened up the season 5-0 when they traveled to face Georgia. That makes them a threat. But I went with South Carolina to come in third, and partly due to the schedule and the fact that Shane Beamer, 2 years, 2 big-time overachievements. I mean, the first year his over-under total win total was 3.5. He got to 7. Last year, they got 6-4, but you know they're going to lose to Tennessee and Clemson, right? I mean, the number 9, number 7 teams in the country, and they end up upsetting both, knocking both out of the playoffs. So we've seen South Carolina overachieve. They get Kentucky at home this year. They get Florida at home this year, and I think that could be the key to them finishing third in the East.
It is interesting, Phil. I got Florida at over 5.5 wins. I couldn't believe it. I said, look, if they can't get to 6 wins, then we got bigger problems than Billy Napier at Florida. You talked about a lot of those teams in the East. The one we didn't touch on is Vanderbilt, and I'll just kind of pose it this way. Much improved, obviously. Clark Lee's done a great job there. He's recruiting well. Is there a path for Vandy to get the 6 wins this year?
You know, I wouldn't have said last year there was a path. I would have said no, absolutely not. And then there they are, 5-6 with 1 game to go. Now, granted, they got blown out by Tennessee, but what an exceptional year for Clark Lee and company. I think they'll be favored against Hawaii. They'll be favored against Alabama A&M. The Wake Forest game, Wake Forest is in a rebuilding type of season. It's not really a dangerous road game. I do think there'll be a 7 to 10 point dog in that game, but they can beat UNLV. They've got Missouri at home. They've got Kentucky at home. I would say, yes, there is a path there. Clark Lee got closer to 6 wins than I thought he could last year. I think he's got that opportunity this year. Their over-under win total is 3.5. I'd go over, and I think they will flirt with the bowl this year.
Back to Phil Steele in just 1 second, but want to remind you this episode is presented to you by our friends over at Nutrafol. Look, you do not have to choose between better hair growth and your health. Nutrafol is providing a whole body health approach for men that promotes healthier hair. No drugs, no compromises, just better hair. Look, we're at that point in our life. A lot of us starting to get a little thin up top, and you need to find a solution. And Nutrafol can be that solution for you guys. They're the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement, clinically shown to improve your hair growth, visible thickness, and visible scalp coverage. Nutrafol's hair growth supplements, they use physician-formulated, natural science-backed ingredients. Their drug-free patented technology provides consistent, reliable results without compromising your sexual health. You can go to their website right now. It's Nutrafol.com. That's Nutrafol.com/men to take their hair health wellness quiz. That's going to identify causes of your thinning hair, and Nutrafol will give you a personalized plan for better hair health through whole body wellness. They got a ton of different products. It's not just one thing. They got tons of different solutions for you. Nutrafol supporting healthy hair growth from within by targeting root causes of thinning, such as stress, hormones, environment, nutrition, lifestyle, metabolism, all through that whole body health. Again, go check them out. Nutrafol.com/men. Take their health wellness quiz and get started on better hair today. Continue our conversation with the great Phil Steele. And Phil, we'll dive into the SEC West here in just a second. But first, I want to remind everybody, of course, you got the website, philsteele.com. Of course, the magazine is on newsstands. I got mine at Barnes & Noble. Call me traditional, Phil. I'm the old paper guy. I got to have the paper in my hands. But let folks know what they can find up there at philsteele.com.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Chris. 352 pages, the magazine is, and it's like getting 133 media guides rolled into one. We give you the same amount of coverage on a team like Sam Houston State that we do on Alabama, Ohio State, and Texas. 2 full pages, everything you need to know about the team. And you're right, the hard copy, you get to mark up, make all your notes during the course of the season. It's dog-eared by the end of the year. Now, it's only available at Barnes & Noble and Books A Million this year. Those are the only 2 brick-and-mortar stores. So if you're used to getting it elsewhere, just go to Barnes & Noble or Books A Million or philsteele.com. And when you go to philsteele.com, you not only get the hard copy when you order it, but we'll give you the digital for free. And when you get the digital, it's updated all the way through September. As an example, Northwestern's head coach in the digital is David Braun, not Pat Fitzgerald. So those are your options, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, or philsteele.com.
I love it. See, Phil, I'm a little bit of a sucker. I started buying these years ago, and now I can't stop. I can't miss a year, right? I got to have them all in my collection. So it's cool to see. And this new copy, I love it, fresh with a bunch of different players, including an Aggie, Anaya Smith, on the cover. And let's dive into the SEC West. A lot of folks kind of torn this year that I've talked to, split between Alabama and LSU to win the SEC West. I look at it, that game when they play each other, it's in Tuscaloosa. So I guess by default, we'll pick Alabama to win the West. And it sounds like you're kind of going the same way.
I am, except unlike everybody else who says, is it Alabama or LSU? I'm saying, is it Alabama, LSU, or Texas A&M?
Wow.
So I've actually got all three teams right there. And let me give you my case for Texas A&M. Now, I didn't pick them to win the West. I picked Alabama, much for the same reason you did, Chris. They get that big game at home. Alabama's almost unbeatable at home. But the reason I lump A&M into that category is last year, they were only number 124 in my experience chart, one of the 10 least experienced teams in the country. In fact, when I went over the team with Coach Jimbo Fisher, a lot of the positions he'd recap this way, like the offensive line. Phil, we're going to have one of the best offensive lines in the country next year. He would say next year, and you knew they were pointing towards 2023. Well, this year they're number 14 on my experience chart. And last year they lost their leading receiver, Anaya Smith, after 4 weeks. They used 3 different starting quarterbacks due to injuries. In fact, on philsteele.com, I've got a blog about starts lost. Texas A&M had the second most starts lost last year. So defense banged up, offensive line banged up. But they recruit the same way that Alabama and LSU and Ohio State do. And last year, even mired in a 5-7 season, guess what? They beat LSU 36-23. And against Alabama, they're on the road in Tuscaloosa at the 2-yard line, down by 4 points at the end of the game, throwing in the end zone with a chance to win. It just came up short. So they showed last year they could play with Alabama and LSU. They've got the talent there. Now they're much more experienced. I think A&M enters into the mix. But for the record, I do have Alabama winning the West. And I've got LSU and Texas A&M tied for second.
A quick thought on Alabama. They lose all these high-profile guys, particularly a Heisman winner in Bryce Young and an edge rusher like Will Anderson. And they still lost 2 games last year. It's hard on the surface, Phil, to look at losing 2 big players like that and saying that this team can improve their win total, but they have recruited very well.
Yeah, and you go back and look at Alabama. In fact, the last time they came in preseason number 4 in the AP poll, guess what? They won the national title. The last time they came into a season and they were not number 1. I mean, they've been number 1 preseason the last 2 years. Well, the last time they weren't number 1 was 2020. Guess what? They went 13-0 and won the national title. So Saban's got the talent. He's got 3 quarterbacks. We don't know who's going to start, but he's got 3 capable quarterbacks in Tyler Buckner, Jalen Milroe, Ty Simpson. And you're absolutely correct. If you look at this team on paper, they're number 127 on my experience chart. They only have 5 starters back on offense, 5 on defense. There are question marks. It's when Nick Saban's at his most dangerous, is this type of year. And I'm not going to be the guy that doesn't pick Alabama to make the playoff.
A quick thought on LSU, because I know you put so much stock into returning starters, and LSU does return a lot on offense. Defense, they had to retool the secondary a little bit, but how much does that matter for LSU, bringing back all the same guys and consistency from last year?
Of all the top teams in the country, only 2 return their starting quarterback, LSU, and then, of course, Michigan. And so Jaden Daniels is back. That's a plus. I think this year's LSU team is vastly improved over last year's LSU team. Last year, I thought they were a little lucky at times to get to where they did at 10-4. This year, they won't need that. They're more experienced, both offensively and defensively. And every second-year coach I talk to tells me the same thing. Phil, we're in much better shape this year. We now know the players. The players know the system. Everybody knows the culture, all that stuff. So I think LSU is a dangerous team this year. They've got some tough games. They've got to play Florida State in the opener. They got to play Ole Miss on the road, and of course Bama on the road, and finish up the season with Texas A&M. So the schedule's not easy, but LSU's a legitimate contender in the West. And if they go into Tuscaloosa and come out with a win, then all of a sudden they're back-to-back champs in the West.
Yeah, it would be an amazing accomplishment for Brian Kelly and company. All right, Phil, so if we got Alabama, LSU, A&M near the top in the West, feels like there's a little bit of a jumbled mess from what is Ole Miss? What is Arkansas? How quickly does Hugh Freeze hit the ground running at Auburn? How do you see this bunch kind of behind those top 3 play out?
Yeah, I've got to my mind, a clear number 4 is Ole Miss. When I look at them last year, they were only number 118 in my experience chart. This year, they're number 27. They've got Jackson Dart, I think, will be a vastly improved quarterback, and they can use Spencer Sanders maybe as a running quarterback. I think that with Quinshon Judkins in the backfield, they're very dangerous. And then offensive line's more experience than last year. Defensively, they had in a ton of transfers. The only 2 games I've got them a true underdog in all year are at Alabama and at Georgia. They catch A&M in a good spot. I believe it's the week after they play Bama. They get Auburn on the road. So I think schedule-wise sets up pretty well for them. Arkansas, they've got another combination there. You're looking at Rocket Sanders and KJ Jefferson. I like that. They're switching up the offense a little bit to more of a pro-style offense. They do lose their top 4 receivers from last year. But when I talked to Coach Pittman, he said he liked the receiver room, and KJ likes the receiver room. So I think what they developed there should be pretty good. It'll be interesting to watch a different offense, but defensively, they're also different. I think they'll be tougher against the run and pass, get a little more pressure on the quarterback. And I think Arkansas is a team that can fit in there. Auburn, probably a year away from making big-time noise, but they did make my most improved list. I do think Auburn gets to a bowl game. Coach Hugh Freeze liked some of the positions, had some question marks at some, but having a guy like Jarquez Hunter back at running back is a nice positive, and he brought in a ton of transfers. And then Mississippi State, I like the talent they have. The one thing I don't like about them is the schedule. That's the reason I picked them 7th in the West. They host LSU and they host Alabama. That means a lot of their winnable games, Arkansas, Auburn, Texas A&M, South Carolina, they're all on the road. They'll probably be a dog in 6 of their 8 SEC games this year, the Mississippi game being a toss-up at the end of the year. So schedule's the reason I have Mississippi State number 7, not talent.
Yeah, and a tough ask there for Zach Arnett in his first year taking over, of course, for Mike Leach. Unfortunate circumstances there, but we'll see how they do this coming year. All right, wrapping it up with Phil Steele. Phil, we ran through the entire SEC with you, so let's go big picture. Who you got making your playoff, and who do you think's going to win this whole thing?
Yeah, the 4 teams I have making the playoff, 2 from the SEC. I've got Georgia and Alabama. Once again, I'm not going to be the guy that doesn't pick Nick Saban to make the playoff, and so I think those 2 set right up there. Out of the Big Ten, you've got 3 really good contenders in Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. Of the 3, this is Jim Harbaugh's best team he's put on the field, and Michigan's got the best schedule. They get Ohio State at home. They do have to play at Penn State, but that's really the only other tough game on the schedule. So I gave it partially due to schedule, partially due to the fact Michigan's very talented. They've got an experienced quarterback in J.J. McCarthy, and they get Ohio State at home. I'm picked Michigan to make the playoff. And then out of the ACC this year, I think a team that's a little bit flying under the radar. I think they're only 8 or 9 in the AP poll coming into the season. I saw a lot of preseason polls didn't even have them in the top 10, and that's Clemson. And when I talked to Coach Sweeney, going over the squad with them, I remember that 2018 defensive line they had, which was amazing, loaded with talent. He said this group doesn't have the star power of 2018, but they're actually deeper in talent and experience than that 2018 group. So I have Clemson defensively with that defensive line, the linebackers of Carter and Trotter, an improved secondary. Katie Klubnik, I think, will do extremely well at QB, and their schedule sets up well. Their toughest 2 play games are Notre Dame and Florida State, and they get them both at home. So add it all up, my 4 playoff teams are Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, and Clemson. I've got Georgia and Clemson meeting for the title game, and I'm going to go with Kirby Smart. I think he knows a thing or two about winning in the postseason. So I will call for the first 3-peat since the 1930s when the Minnesota Golden Gophers did it.
That's unbelievable. I know a lot of Georgia fans will be happy to hear that. Last one for you, Phil, before we let you go. Give me just anywhere across college football. Who's that dark horse? Who's that TCU of last year? A team that we should need to keep an eye on that could make that run and surprise all of us.
Yeah, if you're looking for a team like TCU, I'm going to go with Wisconsin. They're my number 1 surprise team in the magazine. By the way, check out philsteele.com. I'm going to have a blog up about it, a new 1A surprise team that didn't make the top 10 that I thought would make the top 10, but that's philsteele.com. But I like the Wisconsin Badgers for this reason. When I first looked at this team, Chris, I wasn't very high on them because they're talking about the air raid offense for Wisconsin. Let's face it, Wisconsin wins their games in November because of the big O-line and the big running game. And I was a little concerned, but after going over the team with Coach Fickle at the end, he assured me they are not going just full-blown pass. They did bring in Tanner Mordecai from SMU, but they actually have an average 5 yards per carry on the ground over the last 3 years, which surprised me. And he feels that teams have been able to stack the box, 8, 9 guys in the box, forcing them to run into a stacked box. But this year, he feels the passing game will open that up. They might run a few less times, but better YPC. They've got Braylon Allen. They've got Ches Maluzzi in the backfield, the big offensive line, now a pass game. Defensively, they go from 3 returning starters to 8. So a lot of good things here. They go from number 107 on my experience chart all the way up to number 20. And then, as I mentioned, schedule is a big thing. Their home road games this year against Washington State, Purdue, Illinois, Indiana, and Minnesota, all winnable. Their toughest 2 games are at home, Iowa and Ohio State. They catch Ohio State the week after the Buckeyes play Penn State. Add it all up, I could see them winning 11 or 12 games, and then all they have to do is win the Big Ten title game, and boom, they're in the playoffs. So at Wisconsin, 7-6, barely made the AP poll. I think they're a team that could be this year's TCU.
Fascinating. He is, of course, the great Phil Steele. We call him the godfather of college football. As we mentioned, philsteele.com for the digital copy, hard copy at Barnes & Noble. That's where I got mine. And lastly, Phil, you still going to have picks throughout the season up there at philsteele.com?
Yeah, appreciate that, Chris. Yeah, I do a weekly newsletter called Inside the Press Box. You get my computer's forecast on every game, and you get my forecast on every game. Sometimes we argue, but for the most part, we're in alignment on the games. But you get a lot of plays, and we cover every game, Chris. Even if it's FBS versus FCS, you get a complete write-up, a complete analysis throughout the entire season. That's Inside the Press Box.
Phil, always good to talk with you, man, and can't wait. The season's upon us. Thanks so much for your time today.
Hey, a lot of fun talking football with you today, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks so much. That's the great Phil Steele. And you always know, look, college football season is upon us when we talk with Phil Steele. I think last year our season preview we did with Phil was like one of our most watched YouTube videos we've had. So, look, people get excited and Phil brings it, and he's one of the most recognized names when it comes to previewing the college football season. Like I mentioned, I've got my copy here, the hard copy. I get it at Barnes & Noble every year, and all the different covers that he's got regionally and that sort of thing. I'm gonna get the see, I actually have the I think I've got like the Big 12 copy, but it's got A&M on the cover, but I'm looking at the back. He's got covers with Tennessee, LSU, Arkansas, South Carolina, Florida. So there is an SEC cover out there. But look, Phil Steele's one of the best, and I'm looking at it right now. He's got it on the magazine. Phil Steele Plus for $99. You get access to all 133 FBS team pages, 128 FCS pages, NFL teams, power ratings, special team rankings. I mean, they gets deep into the numbers. So just putting that out there if you're interested. Phil, nobody does it better. I mean, look, the best part is this year's copy, the SEC is right at the front. I mean, literally the first conference that he runs through. And I mean, like they literally chock full so much information on these pages. It's ridiculous what they cram in there. But really appreciate Phil for joining us. And again, it's always fun to get into the start of a college football season. Kind of interesting. He said, even with all the losses Alabama has, it's the Nick Saban factor, right? Like picking Alabama to win the West. It's Nick Saban, and you can't, like, the minute you go against him, you're going to regret it and go, what the hell was I thinking? Why did I pick against Alabama? I get a lot of people are jumping on the LSU bandwagon and for good reasons with everything that they bring back. But at the end of the day, that game is in Tuscaloosa this year, and it's hard to win there. We'll see if Texas can do it in week 2. And I also think where it falls on the schedule, Alabama, with all the quarterback questions they have, by the time we get to that game in November, they have their quarterback situation figured out by then. Now, is it up and down? Is it, say it's Jalen Milroe? Is he having kind of a roller coaster, good game, bad game, good game, bad game? Maybe that works in LSU's favor by the time we get to November. But what does LSU look like? How many losses do they have at that point? So, again, there's a whole season to play out here and a lot to be figured out. But you heard it there from Phil Steele. He's going with Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs to hit the three-peat. I was a little surprised by that maybe he didn't want to go elsewhere and, maybe go with that. He was so high on Michigan, talking up Jim Harbaugh. I thought maybe he might lean that way. Kind of interesting. He's got Clemson and Dabo Swinney back in the national spotlight. Obviously, they've been down a little bit for their standards, right? Kind of like saying Alabama was down last year with 2 losses, but some folks picking Clemson to get back, win the ACC, and get back into the college football playoff picture, and that's what Phil has. But you heard him; he's got 2 SEC teams making the last iteration of this 4-team playoff. He's got Georgia and Alabama both making it. Now, how that plays out, are they both undefeated when they get to Atlanta? Whoever wins the SEC championship, the other team gets in as a 1-loss, runner-up, whatever. That I assume is is what he envisions, because I keep looking at Ohio State and Michigan. If they both run the table and then they meet each other at the end of the season, one team has 1 loss, the other one's undefeated, goes on to win the Big Ten. I think it's going to be hard for them to leave out the loser of Ohio State, Michigan, if that other team only has the 1 loss. So this is where it's going to get really sticky at the end of the year for having to make an argument, make a case between 2 SEC teams versus 2 Big Ten teams. Who gets in and why? Does the ACC champ get in? What if USC is a 1-loss Pac-12 champ? Do they get in over a 1-loss SEC non-champ? So that's where the discussion is going to get fascinating. But it always seems like this stuff works itself out, right? It come at the end of the season, for the most part, the College Football Playoff Committee, I think, has overwhelmingly got it right. And I don't think there's been too many arguments for teams left out. And if there is, look, we're going to a 12-team playoff next year with all the craziness and shaking up of conference expansion, everything moving around and all that. But anyway, that is going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. Our thanks again to Phil Steele. Always tremendous insight from him. Love getting his insight on the college football season, previewing everything. And of course, philsteele.com if you guys want to get your hands on a copy of the magazine. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. You guys have a great day. Shout out to our everydayers checking us out every day. Tomorrow on the show, we will, of course, continue our conversation going around fall camps. We'll get you caught up with more updates from around the conference. This has been a Locked On SEC. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.